Okay, the Christian economist. We hold these truths to be self-evident. So is it truths or truths? I think truths. Got to get buzzy in there. We hold these truths to be self-evident. I think it's easier to pronounce it truths. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Okay. I borrowed that line from the founding fathers, okay, of the United States. Okay. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men and women are ... dot dot dot. They go into the whole thing, created equal, da da da. But what I want to emphasize here, that all men and women are endowed by their Creator with ... dot dot dot. And on the founding fathers of the United States wrote, saying they deemed all humanity without exception to have been endowed by the Creator with myriad rights they described as unalienable. I always have trouble pronouncing that. Unalienable. 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 Well, you know what I'm trying to say. You know what they were trying to say. Okay, they weren't wrong, but each human being comes into this world endowed with a lot more than a pocketful of rights. Each human being comes into this existence endowed with an enormous set of extraordinary abilities and are in turn persuaded and discouraged by evil, not only to never use or even try them, but also that they have nothing, which is untrue, if they'd only realize. But the devil doesn't want that, because if they'd realize that God has sent each person into existence highly endowed with many capabilities, they'd start saying something like, hey, maybe there is somebody up there after all. Duh. Some of the many abilities you are endowed with are, quote, economic, unquote, abilities. Yes, some of those many abilities you are endowed with are economic abilities. You each have the ability not only to prosper in spite of all the evil that would try to oppose you, but also the ability to help others around you to use gifts other than merely economic ones. Use gifts other than just merely the economic gifts. Now, we all are new at this and quite unused to such operations, but once accustomed to using abilities in reciprocal prayer and supply from God, also known as faith, the success and miraculous flow of God's supply will ensue, unless you go about it the wrong way, such as being motivated by lust. The Bible explains all the things that get in the way of faith. Ye have not because ye ask not, or that ye ask amiss, that you may consume it upon your lusts. Lust is a perfect example of something evil that would, or something evil would use. I have trouble reading. I have a bad case of dyslexia. So anyway, let's go over that again. Lust is a perfect example of something evil would use to keep you from discovering your abilities. subsequently also growing in faith in the living God. Lust is evil, capitalizing on your fallen nature to be ignorant and to yearn for an inordinate appetite for something to the exclusion of other things you need. Perhaps more, perhaps even critically more than the element you became fixated upon. See? Plus, it gives the devil a chance to use one of his weapons. Lying guilt. Lying guilt, as opposed to a sense of decent behavior, will get a person to do things he or she would never normally do, thus causing massive numbers of people to do the devil's bidding, especially in this, our early 21st century litigant age, the age of lawyers. Okay. But once the Lord delivers you from all of that, you will be able to find the straight gate and walk the narrow road to life, with the supplies flowing in a balanced way, so that all your needs are supplied and applied, not just a few of the baser, humanly understandable ones. You all have incredible abilities. The unsaved and even the saved won't be able to realize most of them because they're too poor to begin with, not rich in what really counts. Those not born again are born partially. Mostly it amounts to merely being born with a choice to live or not to live. Those who choose to live get a new existence of real life. If they are going to remain in lifelessness till their first death, and subsequently after judgment, second death, die again, they certainly cannot be trusted with the incredible abilities afforded to the everyday human being. Even if they have them, they can't be entrusted, or they cannot be trusted. Were they to acquire these natural powers, they'd rip each other apart in the smallness of their tiny minds. Evil is trying to bring certain of the dead again, non-believers, to the realization of certain baser abilities, which they imagine to be acquired abilities of the black arts, instead of what they really are, the gift of God. So these and those born again among the disobedient believers, all right, who are all subject to the devil's infiltrators, are all therefore fitted with what might be labeled, quote, structural restraints, close quotes, so that they might be held at bay. Remember that the Lord foretold their end. I got a typo here. The Lord foretold their end, the time in which. So, typos abound. I had to write this under a lot of stress. Okay, remember the Lord foretold their end as the time. I corrected it there. The Lord foretold their end as the time in which, if God didn't intervene and put things to an end, as it were, no flesh would survive. This is the famous end-time scenario from Matthew 24, in which the peoples of the world, under a false Messiah, would be prospered in their witchcraft and therefore overcome some of the basic structural restraints. The destruction and desolation would be so rampant that at a certain point God intervenes and there is an end, since mankind can no longer believe in God because mankind will have gone beyond belief. They will all know that God exists because he has at that point intervened upon their pathetic debacle, and therefore it's all over at that point. At that point, those 3½ orbits of the Earth around the sun orbits of the Earth orbiting the sun, and then the second coming of Jesus, who makes 2 Earth orbits at almost the speed of light. If something travels at the speed of light, it can go around the Earth 8 times in 1 second. So this is almost the speed of light. So it's going to be probably in milliseconds, I guess. A fraction of a second, maybe somewhat like 1/4 of a second. 2 orbits in 1/4 of a second. All of a sudden, it looks like there's this little flash, and then, well, we'll have to see, because there is the sound of a trumpet and other things predicted. So we'll have to see what happens. We shall see what we shall see. Meanwhile, okay, Jesus' second coming of Jesus, the return of Jesus at his second coming, who makes 2 Earth orbits at almost the speed of light around the Earth, resurrecting all the born-agains and taking them. And then a little while later, Armageddon, when a contingency returns to fight the devil's armies. So basically, where does he take them? He takes them to the marriage feast. Kind of like, all right, they are resurrected and they have a celebration, or we do. And also probably a time of judgment for the saints, which Jesus will judge them. I'm not going to get into that now. I cover this in, just go ahead and type in, if it's still on YouTube, prophecy topics. And I've gone over this in detail in my book, Rescue Volume 2. You can have a look at that. Okay, so basically, first of all, he comes and takes all the born-agains. And then later on, a contingency returns to fight the Battle of Armageddon. And it fights against the devil's armies. But in the meantime, and no one knows how long that will be, if you can work with the Lord in an honest and good heart, in whatsoever state or condition or situation finding yourself, therewith being content, doing all things with contrition, it means humility, right? Without murmurings or disputations, then you too will have become a disciple of Jesus, whom he can usher to the higher positions of true riches, coming into the realization of the true powers of man and the supernatural power of faith, and thereby entering the stature of a good and faithful servant of God and a resident of the household of faith in the full inheritance of the people of God. And we're not talking about a worldly church down here, or a church building, or a movement, or anything else. This is just the born-again Christian. Nothing to do with any organization down here on earth. This is not an organization. This is the kingdom of God. Okay, so that's the end of that section. We hold these truths to be self-evident. It's so obvious.